A really warm welcome to this, which is the Society of Scottish Artists' very first virtual opening for an exhibition. So a really warm welcome to everyone this evening. This is for Urban Departures, which is an SSA members showcase exhibition and has now gone live at Project Room 2020 and is looking fantastic. So if you haven't had a chance to have a look at it, then we'll share the link with you so that you can go along afterwards and have a look at all the work. Hope that everyone has a drink with them. It's nice to have everyone here, so hope everyone is glad to be here and to listen to some of these fantastic artist talks that we've got this evening. I'm Rona, I'm the Vice President, so I'm going to do a quick introduction and some housekeeping, and then I'm going to hand over to Olivia Turner, who is one of our two presidents, and then over to Ros Lawless, who is the co-curator of Urban Departures and is also one of the exhibiting artists. We've also got the four other artists here, so we've got Felicity Bristow, we've got David Lamm, Will Taylor and Matthew Wilson. And unfortunately we don't have Ian Mackay here, who runs Art North Projects and is the editor of Art North Mag, but he's done an amazing job of putting everything together, so we're really, really grateful to him. You'll see that this is a webinar format. That means that we can't see or hear you, but there is a chat box there, so we'd be really grateful if people could just say hello in there, just kind of say who you are, because we can't see who's here. So that would be really nice. And there's also a Q&A box, so please do, we would really encourage you to ask questions to any of the artists, and I'll keep an eye on that as we go along. So when they're doing their short artist talks, if you think of anything that you'd like to ask them, and then we'll do that at the end. So Livy's going to tell you a little bit more about Urban Departures, and then's going to hand over to Ros and talk a little bit about the artists who are involved with this. And then we're really lucky to have all of them doing a short artist talk, as I say. And then after that, we'll do a Q&A. So with that, I will hand over to Livy.
Thank you, Rona. So as Rona said, we're happy to welcome you all here this evening. We'd like to say a huge thank you to Roslyn, to Ian, once again at Project Room, and the Art Mag team for working tirelessly to make this exhibition happen. I don't know if anyone's seen it virtually, but there is two parts of the exhibition. So there is a video which allows you to virtually go through the space, and then there's also complemented with a PDF document which we'll be going through tonight with the artists, so that's good. So originally this exhibition was due to go ahead at House for an Art Lover from the 15th of April to 23rd of June. But unfortunately due to COVID-19, we've had to postpone that now to 2021. We did, however, want to see the exhibition go ahead in some form or other. So this is why we approached Project Room 2020 on the instance. I'd like to thank all you guys for joining us, the artists, and being patient with us while we try to figure out the best way to take this exhibition forward. And I'll tell you a bit about the show now. So it's a members showcase exhibition. We invited Rosalind Lawless to join us to help co-create the exhibition. The work looks at 5 Scottish printmakers and looks at the current conversations happening within the printmaking studios. Each artist looks at that obviously in a different take, and so this evening we'll be hearing more about that in a bit more depth. I think that's a rough overview, really. So I'm going to let Ros speak a bit more about her selection and her ideas behind the exhibition, and I guess why she chose the artist. So hand it over to you, Ros.
Thanks, Olivia. So yeah, I just wanted to say a little bit about the selection of Bill, David, Felicity and Matthew. And it kind of came about through possibly something that was in the back of my head that's been there for a while. As a part-time lecturer, I'm always reminding students about artist research. And when you're looking at artists, sometimes you don't have to have everything in common with them. Sometimes there's just that one link that you kind of touch upon. And maybe that was something that was there in the back of my mind that I just kind of thought about over the last couple of days. And when I was looking at the work of the 4 artists, the one obvious common link for me was the use of material and the kind of unconventional uses of material that we kind of all were doing, but in very different ways. And I found that quite kind of exciting, quite liberating to choose or to select people that there wasn't an immediate commonality of maybe subject matter or ideas, but it was this unconventional material. And as a printmaker for possibly 20 years now, there's always been that kind of internal struggle maybe with printmaking and kind of trying to always break the rules or kind of use it in different ways. So I think when I came across these people and my ideas about artists and how it's quite exciting to find somebody that you don't have to have everything in common with, but there's one kind of strand that pulls you together and it kind of opens up another idea. So for me, that was the main thing. That there was with Felicity, there was an idea of installation and architecture, which seemed quite, I suppose, obvious for my own passion with architecture. There was geometry and Bill Taylor. There was a repetition that Matthew always spoke about, which I was really excited about as a printmaker. There's always a talk about kind of permutations of always kind of trying something else in very different ways. And David Lamm spoke about different substrates, which again, that was a thought that I had in my head as well about the substrate, because I think as printmakers, we're probably all very used to paper, but then it doesn't have to be paper. And I think us as 5 artists were using material in such a way that was possibly being unconventional that kind of, I just wanted to know more about them and kind of see it all together. So yeah, that was my ideas. Hopefully that made sense.
Thanks very much for that. I think if that's a good moment for us to move over to doing some of the talks. So our first artist who's going to speak about her work is Felicity Bristow. I'm just going to give her a very quick introduction. All of this is available to read in the PDF that's on Project Room 2020. Felicity studied at Edinburgh College of Art and has an MA in Contemporary Art Practice. She's also a qualified architect and taught architecture at ECA. She's one of the founding members of the artist book collective Bound Unbound. In her work, Felicity explores the idea of the analogue book in abstract, developing the themes of transformation and abstraction of the book as an object or container for a visual narrative.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you, Rona, and thank you, Ros, as well. It's actually been a real delight to be part of this and to see the final show as well. And I really appreciate all the hard work that has gone in to take this forward as well. Just want to say hello to everyone. Hope everyone's safe and well. I want to give you a kind of a brief insight into the work that's part of this exhibition, Urban Departures. I'll try not to go on. You have to stop me if I burble on. The works in the shown here are taken from a recent series of exhibitions that I worked in collaboration with 2 other artists, Liz Douglas and Jenny Pope, which was under the title Tools for Survival. The 3 of us both were looking at the notions of what it is to survive. This work was really completed or started in 2019, but it is also very relevant now in terms of lockdown and our current situation, working and finding a way through. I was looking specifically at the idea of physical and mental flooding and using methods within my making to kind of test ideas. It's really nice that Rose picked up on the idea of materials and how it relates to space. And this is something I find really interesting. In the Glasgow and in Hawick, I was setting things up to relate to the space as well. So it was about the architecture and the form. The work shown here was partly also inspired by the domestic room at Hawick Museum, where I was looking at, there was a spiromograph machine which records the pulse via stylus, so very fine marks onto smoked paper. This was the original kind of blood pressure machines. And there was a wrap of what's called Reckitt's Bag Blue, which is a laundry wash block made from synthetic ultramarine and baking soda. So it was picking up on these materials and using these colours in my work as well. So you've got the kind of copy of the Reckitt's Blue in the blue inks and using papers as well. In making these pieces, I was using I was flooding papers as well, so exploring this idea of flooding and to physically flood the material. So I can show you a couple of just test pieces here. So these are folded pieces here, which were test works. You can see colours start to separate on the works as well. And these became kind of wall books and installations. I was just going to say, if you can turn back to the last slide, just to show all the works that I make, I still see as this idea of the book. And even though the scale of materials change, I still see the threads, I still see the pages and the narrative and the patterns and mark making that I do. The Lifelines piece has a special knot called a monkey knot, which is used in sailing and things, but it's a very kind of grippable knot as well. So I like this idea of people almost wanting to touch and engage with the pieces as if you would a book as well. The very simple mark making processes. I also used Riso printing as well, which is, for everyone who doesn't know about that, that's a kind of mix between screen printing and photocopying, but you reduce your marks to a single colour and you can overlay these as well. Through my research into floods and how people deal with it, I was looking at survival kits. So this is where the idea of the flood marks kit came from. So it was an idea that you could use creativity and making to help you survive, to create a special place where you could remove yourself from maybe a turbulent time or to divert your energies. It could be a flood, it could be like now when we're all looking for something to do with our hands and kind of keep occupied and not have to think wholly about COVID and things. So the other idea as well in using Riso print is it could be something repeated and available to people, so it's quite low cost and was available as a multiple and was accessible, which is something as well I like in this idea of print and small editions of books. How am I doing for time? Am I almost done?
Yeah, you can keep going for a bit if you like.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine. One of the things that I wanted to pick up in the detail of making the flood books is that there is an artist who designed a book structure called the blizzard structure, which she made as a kind of spine binding during a blizzard. And so the fold that I have made for these books is adapting that idea of securing the pages but making objects out of the spines, which is where these kind of folds come from. It's kind of inverting the blizzard structure and making flood structures essentially. And in repeating patterns, I would then edit down and make things from those works as well. So it has also, between the two shows and to now, there have been further developments such as the Upstream Brick, which is on the screen at the moment. So this was about bridging between two covers. Having seen flooding in Hoyk recently, where buildings kind of fell into the water and things, this became quite a kind of instantaneous reaction to how the work might develop there as well. So I like this idea that I could continue and reshape the materials as well. So it might start as the flat page, but it becomes more sculptural as well. So yes, I guess that in essence is describing what you're seeing, and it's hoped that it appears a calming and contemplative space when the work is shown. And with the other pieces as well in the new virtual show, it's really exciting to see how things are sitting together and with the other prints and materials. So it's been lovely to see how that's been kind of curated. So thank you, Ros, I really appreciate that, and to Ian and the team as well. Yeah, just want to say thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Felicity.
Thanks very much. Thank you. So now we're gonna move on to Ros, who we've already met. Ros graduated with a Masters of Fine Art from the Royal College of Art, and she was recently awarded the Salzburg International Academy of Fine Arts Scholarship, among lots of other awards. You can read more about them, as I say, in the project room. Her work is in collections including Stirling University, Pallant House and Aberdeen Art Gallery, and she exhibits both nationally and internationally. And obviously she's also the co-curator of Urban Departures.
Thanks, Rona. Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly say the thank you again to Ian Mackay from Art North magazine. Massive thank you this with Ian and the SSA. So yeah, kind of, I'm quite excited to speak about this work for different reasons, but for me, it's and I suppose for all artists, it's another chance to kind of reconfigure in your head why the work is made and kind of how it all sits together over a period of time. And from 2019 onwards has been quite a kind of period of lots of different kind of realizations about my artwork and kind of different progressions, which have been quite exciting and kind of still ongoing. And it kind of started with the piece that you're looking at just now called Fold at the beginning of 2019, where I was invited to have a show at the Glasgow Print Studio. So immediately, kind of, at that point, I wanted to almost take a step back from paper, from the kind of the materials that I had become so familiar with, and having this opportunity for this exhibition kind of gave me that kind of big kind of shake up things. So I did a almost 180 and I moved to my studio in South Block in Glasgow Wasps, and I started working on canvas. I started working with pastel. I started working with all different materials, but not working with what I had normally been working on. And it didn't take long. I think it took about 5 minutes to realise that I wanted to move back to paper and screen print. But I did the exciting thing for me was what I found out during that process of working on canvas was I think having massive big bits of canvas up on my studio walls and drawn with different materials like pastel and so on. It made me reconfigure the pictorial space, I suppose, which was something that maybe I didn't have enough space from doing it within the kind of printmaking studio. So at this point, I moved my ideas straight back from canvas, straight back into print, into screen print, but this time with a whole different idea, a whole different set of rules maybe. And I think the main thing for me was that I re-thought about composition and space and negative space, which is one of the pieces you see before you is almost a culmination of lots of different pieces that kind of came together and were cut up and put back together again, almost as a kind of chance happening, chance occurrence. And this was something that I was also working on, about this idea of kind of waste in terms of paper, because as printmakers we do tend to use a lot of paper, and I was very conscious of it, and conscious of also, what if you throw away the wrong bit? What if that's the bit that you want to keep, and how do you know? So everything was getting kept in my kind of drawer at the studio, and then it was about kind of putting it back together again, and hopefully that chance occurrence of almost. I heard a story about Tony Cragg in his studio once, and it was getting flooded, and he got told by his friend to stack up all his work, and that's how he came about with his idea of stacking. And it was that chance occurrence of, I was in my studio, and at the end of a day, as printmakers know, you always have to de-rack and put your work away and move it back into a drawer. And I was almost doing that, and subconsciously by placing things on top of each other, something was happening. So that was how this kind of progression kind of started from 2019 onwards. And the other piece, which is called Twist and Bend, which is the next, or a couple of slides later, the one after that, was after the residency in Salzburg. So it kind of felt like a little bit of a culmination of almost before and after, the realization of bringing artwork together again, bringing screen printing, but with a new found idea of materials. So this piece that you're looking at just now has maybe about 5 layers, but it's not 5 layers of screen print, it's 5 layers of maybe acetate or a poster and a bit of black card and a piece of true grain that you would normally use to expose a screen with, but instead of using it to expose the screen, I just wanted to use it as something to screen print on top of and put it onto the actual the artwork. So it was all about the substrate and yeah, so there's quite a lot of things. And again, that piece was the chance occurrence, the chance happening. And then 2020, which is the next two pieces, brought about the show at Wasp Studio, which is actually still on just now, only because it's happened in March and it didn't get closed. So the piece that you see called Latch Number 1, the piece on the yellow, the kind of exciting thing that happened in Salzburg, where I got to spend a month in a fortress and be surrounded by different you know, unfamiliar objects, unfamiliar language, and so on and so on. And that kind of just reawakened another kind of subject matter. So the exciting thing was I had kind of been rediscovering my making, but by going to Salzburg, I rediscovered my ideas, I suppose. So there's two pieces that you see in front of you, really, you know, for me, a complete departure because they're representational, kind of, which kind of scares me because my work has never been a representational image before. But I think I immediately knew there was an abstraction there, and they're also kind of that, the one on the right with the pink and reds is again that chance occurrence, the happy accident that happens in screen printing, where you are almost using paper as a what's it called, like a something to sit underneath, you know, to kind of block out something else that you don't want to get printed. And so again, maybe not knowing at the time that this piece was going to become the realization of the object, but it only happened through time of kind of re-looking at it. So, and I suppose finding out about this show maybe at the beginning of the year, it just kind of became, I suppose it's almost that experimental thing of, I wanted to see them together. I wanted to see these two pieces sitting beside each other and figuring out, you know, what it meant. So it's all quite new and still kind of figuring things out. And the fact that these pieces are, just lastly quickly, is they are latches from, you know, they were obviously only that size, and it was a photograph that I took while I was in Salzburg. I was mainly working on wall rubbings, so I was doing these shoes, big frottage. They all got shown in an exhibition in Stalinbrand at the end of the year, and this little latch that had been kind of saved on my phone, I didn't know it was going to become something. But yeah, almost just immediately as soon as it got kind of printed out onto acetate or something, and just kind of hitting it once with, maybe, I think that was a magenta, but when you print magenta onto yellow, it was a red. So my technical brain was kind of back in motion again, which was quite nice. So yeah, and the interesting thing is, this is the end. This is the last piece of work that I've made. Obviously, there was a lot of home working going on. I'm surrounded by lots of things at the moment, but you know, it's kind of looking at this, it was almost like, you know, for me, it's what happens next, you know, when we get to go back to our studios, I suppose. So yeah.
Thanks very much. That was really interesting. And again, if anyone's got questions for us, we're going to do a quick, if we've got time, we'll do a quick Q&A at the end. So please fire them there into the Q&A box. Thanks very much, Ros. So we're going to move on to David now. So David Lamm primarily creates context-specific works in response to the experience of particular environments, objects, systems, and encountered phenomena. His diverse output is realised through process-led inquiry and includes printmaking, drawing, collage, and digital techniques. He's currently developing sculptural public art commissions with Edinburgh World Heritage and Shetland Arts. Both are due to be installed later this year. So over to you.
Oh yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys, and big thanks to everyone for making this happen as well. Obviously not the best circumstances, but yeah, really appreciate you putting the effort in to do this. I guess if we could flick through, yeah, nice one. So yeah, these works were originally made from a solo exhibition at Edinburgh Printmakers a few years ago, which was entitled Debris and Phenomena. And these are two kind of really important ideas and recurring themes that I often explore in my practice. As you were saying there, I'm interested in creating works which respond to the experience of particular places and environments and objects. So the ideas of debris and phenomena and trying to replace the other and each of those kind of cancelling each other out, or the other one becoming the other, is something I'm really kind of interested in. And walking is becoming an increasing part of my practice as well. So these works were based around walks around the Broughton area of Edinburgh, where the old Edinburgh Printmakers used to be. So my intention was to present the landscape as a sort of abstract code, as maps do, through forms and abstract motifs that are derived from the landscape. The idea was that I wanted to invite the viewer to consider their own relationship with the urban space and the information that's presented there. So yeah, I've always kind of been interested in maps, and although I've always kind of thought of them as being sort of vehicles for imagination or storytelling, you'd always be in the back of my dad's car on holidays kind of poring over atlases and, well, the road maps, and well, I ended up being the navigator mostly. But yeah, I've always kind of been interested in maps and what they can do and kind of being accessed at other places and the other, I suppose. So I found this collection of Admiralty charts a few years ago, and I was waiting for an opportunity to use them. And this was a kind of big realization, or a big opportunity to do that. I'd done some work with them previously, but this felt like a development of that work. So yeah, I originally was drawn to the sort of strangeness and abstraction of these sea charts, effectively the ephemeral quality of them, and the abstraction of the detail being in the sea rather than the land. Whilst I'm not really interested in specifically or explicitly talking about place or using details of places or the actual space that's being depicted in the work that I use, I try to use as the most abstract areas as possible. It's something that I'm still compelled by and kind of drawn to. It was interesting hearing Rosalind speaking there about using material that kind of already exists and the idea of waste within printmaking, and I'm drawn to the idea of artists kind of using materials that already exist and kind of reimagining them and giving them new life. And the fact that these sea charts had so much life in them already was really kind of appealing. So I respond to and reimagine the data that is presented within them, and try and apply my own abstract language to hint at sort of coded alternative narratives within the abstraction of the sea charts as well. And each work is unique, and it's hand printed in 3 colours each of these, so I don't have much room for error. If I make a mistake, I kind of need to find a new bit of chart when I make work like this. So I'm just sort of going through, I've just sort of brain dumped all the things that are about the work that I thought might be interesting, so bear with me if I'm just sort of listing things. But the idea that these maps were important tools for defining and understanding reality is a really kind of key point of why I use them. I like the idea that they're obsolete, or they're just printed marks on old paper. They're like collections of abstract symbols and lines, or abstract graphic debris that can be manipulated. So this idea of debris or found material that can be manipulated, but it's not just the paper, it's actually the information in there. The idea of information structures being really fragile and vulnerable to our perception and our perception of what is real is really interesting to me. It's a sort of metaphor for the flood of information that we're given every day. What is signal, what is noise, what information should be trusted within these presented artworks. Some lines are deliberately hard to tell what is added and what is original. And I think that's quite an important and interesting idea in printmaking. These are unique prints, which is kind of at odds with the printmaking tradition of multiples. So yeah, so this materiality of the charts is a key part of the work as well. And I think of them as sort of relics of a pre-digital age. I'm really interested in the quality of his objects, the ephemerality of them. They're to be encountered, and they're not just they are just images on a screen today, and for this exhibition. But that's maybe not ideal. But to see them, you understand that they've had life and they've got handling marks, they've got spilt coffee or drawn additional info, and that's a sort of a deterioration of the information as well as the paper. So yeah, so I can specifically talk about, if you go back a page, please. The image on the right is a work called Landmarks, and this was the lead exhibition from the exhibition at Edinburgh Makers, and it was a key to sort of the work of sort of 40 other pieces within the show. And this work is a sort of abstract map of the route around the old Edinburgh Printmakers building that I walked. And I found sort of various elements in the landscape that I found appealing to me in some way or other, and I felt that I had opportunity for further inquiry. So I made this sort of symbol set and route that could be walked, and there was an interactive element as well where participants would come and walk, and I had to find these symbols in the landscape and then make their own version of this print. And yeah, so from the sort of other works then emerged. So each of those symbols on the chart then represented another work, and from that other works emerged as well. So this was very much the key sort of image within the exhibition. And I like to keep these pieces kind of open to interpretation and encourage the viewer to find their own paths and narratives within the work itself. Just as one might do when exploring a place for the first time. So yeah, I guess that hopefully that gives a bit of insight into the work and process and thinking behind it. And I didn't ramble too much. So.
No rambling at all.
Okay.
Thank you very much, David. That's really interesting. So next, we're going to move on to Bill Taylor. So Bill works from his studio in Newport-on-Tay. I believe he's in Newport-on-Tay this evening, as well as from the print studio at Dundee Contemporary Arts. He graduated in drawing and painting from Duncan of Jordanstone College of Art in Dundee, followed by a year of postgraduate studies. He's exhibited locally and nationally and has been the recipient of several awards and commissions. His work is essentially landscape-based and inspired, and his work attempts to communicate a sense of space and provide an opportunity for contemplation. So over to you.
Hello, hi. First of all, can I say a big thank you to everyone who's had a part in organising this. I think the exhibition looks amazing online, and it's certainly the very next best thing to actually seeing the work in an exhibition. Can also say that I found, listening to the other artists talk about their work, I see so many similarities between what I'm doing and what other people are doing, and so it's quite a nice, quite an encouraging thing to find the similarities. Right, I trained initially as a painter, and although I did a little bit of printmaking over the years, it wasn't really something that I felt particularly comfortable with, and so I only took up printmaking seriously about 5 years ago. And I began with digital printing, and I wasn't interested in the craft aspect of it or fine art printmaking. It was more about developing ideas. But I soon got an interest in the practical aspect and began working in screen printing. I moved from there to lenticular printmaking, then woodblock, and most recently I've gone back to etching again. Some of the experiments, I must say, have been less successful than others. With the present lockdown and no access to printmaking facilities, I've begun to work on the most recent etchings that I've brought home to work in colour on. And instead of working in colour, I've started cutting into them and using reflective surfaces. Now, most of my work is landscape based, more specifically, I suppose, the coastline, and that's the subject matter of all three prints in the show. While my paintings are abstract, I tend to use photography in my prints. In these particular works, I suppose I'm trying to make sense of moving through the landscape. I like the phrase drawing a line through the landscape, being there, the space, the time, the movement. And I suppose you could call these prints geometric interventions into the landscape. The first print on the left, called Walking the Coast East, I should maybe refer to the poetry of Kenneth White here, because it was his poem, a long poem called Walking the Coast, from his book The Bird Path, that probably influenced me in making these works. The piece on the left that you're looking at just now, the vertical line is really there as a stopping point. The coloured line, moving left to right, represents the continuing journey. I particularly liked the woodblock technique, since the accidental marks that appear in the skyline certainly emphasize the kind of drifting sky, and the vertical lines add a certain stillness, I think, to the woodblock. The piece on the right, called Forth, Forth refers to the Forth estuary, but also kind of going forth. It's part of the Walking the Coast theme. The original photograph, which provides the background, has been altered quite considerably in order to distance the image from the original image. It might appear real, but it's not. The short vertical lines, which move diagonally across the surface, are there to suggest movement and receding distance. But at the same time, they also emphasize the flatness of the printed surface. So the background tends to recede to the left and into the distance, but the vertical lines hopefully provide a balance and a stillness, and provide a kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, kind of puzzle, if you like, between what's there and what's not there, and what's here, what's in the distance, what's moving into the distance. If we can go to the next slide, the final image is called Walking the Coast North, and it continues the same theme. Two separate images, diagonally split for emphasis by a yellow line and by a break in the outline, which attempts to convey movement along the coast. Also, I suppose, the movement of the tide. Again, the wood grain texture suggests the sky, but not an actual sky. It's a wood grain. I'd be very happy to answer questions if anyone wants to ask me anything. And that's all for the moment.
Thanks very much, Bill. I think, yeah, just to, as I say, to re-emphasize that if you have got questions, then please do just pop them in the Q&A box, because everyone's, well, I say everyone's very happy to answer them, but it would be nice to get questions from people if you would like to ask them. So thank you very much for that, Bill. And I think last but not least, we're going to move over to Matthew Wilson. So Matt is currently based in Edinburgh. He recently graduated from the Royal College of Art and previously studied fine art in Dundee. He was selected for the RSA New Contemporaries back in 2014 at the Royal Scottish Academy, and again has won a lot of other awards that you can read about on the Project Room exhibition. His practice focuses on human actions that are rooted in repetitive processes. He has a background in printmaking, but he also works in a variety of media, including sculpture, performance, writing, and sound. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to start by saying thank you to Rona and Liv for orchestrating this event in incredibly weird circumstances for everyone. And thank you to Ros for having me as one of the artists involved in this exhibition, and also to all the other artists for providing some amazing work. I'm like surprised how good it looks on this sort of online format. So yeah, I think hopefully I can talk about all the works that I have on display here, just because they're all from quite different projects. There's one in particular that I would definitely like to focus on, but hopefully you can sort of cover all the others. And if there's any questions about anything that I might have missed about some of the other works, then feel free to ask them. I guess I just want to start by saying, like, all the works that are on display in this exhibition, they're rooted in my background in printmaking or print media, like, despite they all kind of appear as sculptural works or even just works of like outright sculpture. I think they all kind of tie into that my way of working in print, which I always kind of see as like a philosophy of process, and it's I think for print to kind of be classed in a sort of a fine art category, it's when it uses its kind of repetitive nature that everyone like associates with it, like the printed editions and things like that, and it kind of allows its kind of variation of outcomes from that repetitive thought, that instead of just it being a kind of rigid reproduction tool that's kind of I think like a bit of a stigma against print media. So it's almost like it's sort of I always try and think of working with print media or beyond print media as if it were almost like collage, so kind of like collecting items and objects and ideas and media and sort of breaking them apart and taking smaller parts of ideas and kind of zooming right in on them, and putting things to one side and repurposing them and putting them back together and kind of reassembling them into something. So I think like that is essentially, like, print for me is like the breakdown of media to be repurposed into something else, if that kind of makes sense. And I would say like all of these works are kind of created using that way of thinking, or putting that sort of variation on printmaking. So I mean, for example, if you look at the images on the next slide, so this work here, titled Elevated Quarry, which is, you look at the materials that are used to make it, as well as this kind of lump of like chalk mineral that's on the top of it. There's this kind of traced elevation of like cast concrete that goes underneath it, and that that came from a project that was about it was focusing on like a humankind relationship with like fragments of a specific landscape, and like in particular looking at one individual chalk quarry, which was in East Sussex. And this, you think about this material of concrete, it itself is almost like a kind of, it's like a broken down industrialized version of chalk or of calcium carbonate. And so it's like it itself has been extracted and like kind of again repurposed and stretched out and repeated into this sort of multi-layered object. And also on the previous slide, the image on the left, lithography stone, is kind of, I think when I created it at the time, for me, it was this almost like tongue-in-cheek little reference to the idea of, like, if this were, again, if this is made of concrete, if this were a lithographed stone, it would be completely useless and fragile. But also, I always kind of like the idea of this, you know, a lithographed stone is something wholly unique to create something, to reproduce something over and over again on an industrial level traditionally. And yet this time it's kind of, I now have a silicon mold of this unique stone that can be reproduced over and over again in whatever fashion I kind of see fit. And also, I think mainly that idea, that approach that I have to printmaking or to fine art in general is probably, I'd say it's best kind of realized in this piece on the right here, titled Variable Flora Number 1, after Bliss Vesalius Wilson. I think it is the most recent piece of work of mine. I think it's a culmination of all these years of me kind of figuring out what print media is to my practice and how it can best be emphasized in my work, kind of beyond, you know, traditional 2D print. It's kind of based on a handful of things, and it's the first of hopefully a series if we ever get out of lockdown. I kind of just started working with this motif of what you see in this kind of plinth object, of this floorboard pattern, this like parquet floor. And it's a very like ubiquitous pattern that you kind of see anywhere and everywhere, especially in a lot of like kind of museum-like galleries in the UK. And I found it interesting that the way that this, like, again, it's that kind of individual object that's multiplied however many times and then interwoven into this unique pattern that, yes, it is its own sort of repetitive pattern, but if you kind of, you know, if it stretched on infinitely, you would have this kind of, you'd have infinite variables of where one could go with the pattern. And I think and if you look at like this sort of, it's a similar kind of approach that I had when choosing these sort of little pieces of like ephemera or just these little objects or images that I've chosen to kind of go onto that surface. So there's things like just on the bottom right hand of the piece, there's an image of a performance that I carried out at Summer Hall about a year ago, which was based on this ideographic language called cementography, which was developed after the war in the 40s, and that's referenced in the bottom left-hand corner of the piece. And it's a like short story of it is that is a kind of like singular symbol for the word machine, and the performance was kind of focusing on like what we, you know, the kind of the mechanics of the human body. Like this, it was sort of, I kind of carried it out by tracing this circle using the sort of circumference of my own body, essentially, over and over again, and then kind of using different various tools in a repetitive way to sort of draw up this symbol. So it's kind of focusing on our sort of what we try to do to be mechanical, and also at the same time sort of showing these kind of variables in the actions, from the fact that I'm a human being and not a machine, and there will be a different outcome. And also it kind of links to that then got me thinking about, you can see in the top right of the image a stack of lithographs that are taken from Andreas Vesalius's anatomy drawings, and also that's kind of also in like in the very bottom right corner, there's a lump of chalk, which kind of harks back to my previous works, which is kind of how I got to working with chalk for the performance in the first place. If you could, you know, it's a whole bag of things that I think just kind of I want to keep working into this project and just approach everything like a collage, basically. And so, like, despite this whole thing being made up of like media that's definitely like disparate and a little bit it's, you know, you're unsure how it's kind of made up together, but it's that idea of kind of me as the artist finding those things that I'm interested in and sort of zooming in and like picking out the little parts and like forming something that will then kind of fall under this overarching theme in my work, which is that kind of the variation in process and repetition, if that makes any sense. Yeah, sorry, I think I've gone a little bit over in talking.
That's fine.
But
It's
I'm
very
done.
interesting. Thank you very much. That was great. I am gonna just kind of check the Q&A in a sec, but I don't know if any of the artists want to ask any of the others any questions. Then please do kind of go ahead while I do that. Anyone has any questions to ask? Otherwise, somebody has kind of asked something that sort of ties into something I was going to ask a little bit. And they were asking about having to overcome things as an artist. And I was just going to ask, because a couple of you have touched on things like, you know, sort of using different materials and using materials that you might not necessarily want to be using, and that kind of thing. And also David, just, you know, him mentioning the fact that a lot of your work is to do with walking and things. And I was just wondering about the current situation that we've got, whether there was anything, not that you're going to sort of incorporate into your work, but kind of whether you can kind of see that as being part of your artistic process in any way, or is there any work that you've been able to make sort of while we've been in lockdown? You know, has it kind of fed into your practice in any way at all? That's to anyone, really.
Just quickly for me, it was about a different kind of discipline that was brought in, being by yourself, I live alone, and being, you're the, you know, when you're working in a print studio or something like that, you've got a set of rules of lunch breaks and people and different discussions, and then having basically 24 hours, 7 days a week on your own. There was a different discipline and a different work ethic, but that led me to think about what I was thinking about in Salzburg, because I started to think about the latch, for example, that you saw was about the workers. It was about a lot of the wall robins that I made were about, like I rubbed a fire hydrant in a post box, and these were things that at the time I didn't know, but then because I didn't know that post box looked like that in Salzburg. But so I was very aware of the workers' mark, the kind of the maintenance. And then when we get into lockdown, it became like, okay, now I'm the worker and it's up to me to keep making this happen. That's the only kind of thing that I wanted to keep what was in my head alive from the last residency and all that stuff kind of going. And I think that was quite important there was a point where I was like, what if I forget everything, you know, where was my last strand of thought, you know? So yeah, that was just that. Anybody else?
Well, no, I think it is picking up on Rose's point about using waste materials. That really timed with me, because I'd started, it's not waste materials, but recycled papers and things, and enjoying the kind of glitches and errors that you get when you're printing onto it or using ink. So it's possibly, I'm just working with what I've got in the studio because I have a studio at home. So I'm gradually going through my drawers, finding all sorts of bits of paper and, you know, Chinese paper and thin, thick, and kind of playing with it. I would say the biggest thing for me is that slowing down, which I think is a good thing. And certainly with looking at the work for the exhibition, it's been really nice to kind of go back to look at that and think about the work and how it relates and the kind of the processes as well.
I think just quickly that is a very important thing, talking about that way when David was mentioning maps and so on, and I was very aware and maybe consciously brought home X amount of bits of paper from work from my studio, but I consciously knew that I wasn't going to buy anything else or use anything else. So it was quite interesting to just use what was at my home, because when you're in a studio, you can jump to the art shop or you can buy something else. So I think that's been quite interesting to know that you can keep on making, but in a completely different way of what the only material you have in front of you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and I suppose we're all printmakers who are used to having possibly facilities at our hand, and then you don't have them anymore. So
yeah, I think it's Roz is right. I think that sort of adjusting to life without workshops, I guess, has been the biggest challenge. I kind of thought like a lot of my work has been based around a written practice over the last years, and I thought like, oh, I'm going to get so much writing done, and because lockdown is the most uninspiring thing to be in, I just haven't wanted to do it at all. Yeah. And also, like, you know, art shops are closed, and they're kind of inundated with online orders, so it's more just sort of been, for me, I guess it's been a case of like, well, what can I salvage? What can I, like, what have I got under my bed? What can I get on, like, off of, what kind of printing ink can I get off of eBay? And like, what kind of casting materials can I get? And it's actually kind of suited the way that I sort of wanted to make work for the stuff I'm working on at the minute anyway. So it took a good like month and a half to want to do anything in this time period, but it's kind of, you know, you figure out what it is. I think when it gets to the point you're so bored, you figure out what you want to do.
I managed to find an escape route through looking back at an exhibition I'd had over a year ago, and I decided to do an online, to actually do a catalogue. And that was quite an interesting exercise to undertake, because it was a new skill to learn, putting the thing together, but also looking back at the work and making decisions about it and thinking about the work I was going to make. And so that helped me out quite a bit when I wasn't able to get to the studio or the printmaking studio. But also I'd brought home quite a number of prints from the print studio with the view to using colour on them. But in fact, as things developed, I started to look at other ways of working. My daughter gave me the catalogue for the Picasso and paper exhibition from the Royal Academy, and I didn't specifically copy anything, but just subliminally, the idea of working with paper and doing different things with it has led me to use the prints that I had in a different way from what I planned. So just like other people were saying, we've got the work, but it's what to do with it is the issue in lockdown, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've been quite enjoying the space and the time to just, you know, think and look back over work and kind of organise ideas that have been stacking up and whatever, and also kind of having, I sort of left my studio just before lockdown officially started, and I'm in this spare room, this quite bland spare room, but I kind of filled a bag of paper and old prints and things. I'm looking at how they can be reimagined into something else, and trying to make that into a collection of work. I suppose it reflects this time, but but yeah, it's not really been the easiest time to work, and
No.
kind of finding that the inspiration or headspace to kind of, I mean, I've enjoyed the headspace of like just having, sitting down and organizing a folder of ideas, or
I think the first month I found it almost like first day at art school, where I was teaching myself how to draw again, and I was like, okay, this is okay, just don't show anybody. And it was almost like that, because we were using, I brought home one magenta from the studio, and I don't think, again, I did it consciously, but I was grabbing things and all I brought home was a acrylic thing of magenta. And I was like, that's okay, I can make lots of colours from magenta and put a bit of blue pastel in there or something. But I think it was very, I think I started to go outside and draw like the way I would if I was on residency or something. And it was like, no, you're not on residency, you're on lockdown and it's Glasgow. And I was just like, don't force it, it's okay. So yeah.
I definitely got those residency vibes, because I was I was on Sky for 3 months, so this has kind of been about the same time that I was on Salarostig, and I thought that this could be a kind of home residency thing, and it's not really worked out like that. Luckily, I haven't been funded for it, so I've not got any pressure to. I think, but being outside, actually, it's been quite interesting thinking about the walking that Rona was talking about. That it sort of highlighted how everyone is just walking, and it's been everyone's daily leisure, daily like excitement.
I find that very interesting. Yeah,
that's been something that I've really, and there's something. I live in Leith, and just beside the links, and the links is just covered in these new desire lines and pathways kind of opening up, and because people are trying to have these, they have this the 2 meter separation, and all these new paths are kind of emerging, like these repeated paths, I suppose, trying to link everyone's chat together. But it's really interesting just from that perspective to see how people are actually navigating the landscape and hopefully avoiding.
I think it's quite interesting because of your environment, your neighbourhood now becomes the most important thing, and it's something that you're surrounded by. So I've got a lot of friends that live in the West End of Glasgow, and they're all been about Kelvin Grove Park, which is beautiful, and they're all posting pictures of lovely flowers. And I live right in the centre of Glasgow, so my neighbourhood is just buildings, bricks. And obviously I love that, but it's like I'm not going to have the pleasure of just walking to a park or something like that. But it's just quite interesting to just focus on the a 1 mile radius of your home, which we don't ever really do we?
Yeah. It's actually really interesting you're talking about that, because I live in quite a rural area and I'd love to get to the city.
Really?
No, I feel like that as well, because we live in a hamlet, so we have our roots out of it, but like get me to town. But no, also I was saying Susie Wilson and I are collaborating. We have a residency as part of the Art Walk Party, and we're supposed to be on site in an allotment working. So we're now working by post, but doing kind of small scale prints and artist books and just kind of sending each other things, which has actually turned out to be kind of events of the week. It's like the greet the postman, open arms. It's like, hooray. But no, it's definitely taking time the first 6 weeks to work out how to kind of keep going, how to shift. And I think artists generally are pretty creative in that, and just hearing you all talk as well, everyone's finding a way through, which is all really interesting as well. I wonder how we're all continuing next 6 months. It's going to be interesting to see.
We'll have to have you back in 6 months' time. Well, hopefully we'll be able to meet up in real life before that. Listen, we've run ever so slightly over, so I think we're going to wrap that up there. But listen, thank you ever so much to all of the artists who've come along and given their time, and actually who also put in a lot of work for an exhibition that couldn't happen in real life. And we really, really appreciate you being so good about what's happened. And Ian, as we've all said, did an absolutely amazing job, and it looks fantastic. So everyone, I think, have we shared the link? I think it's projectroom2020.org. So I'm gonna, well, I'm not, someone could type that into the chat. If the admin can do that, that would be great. But yeah, projectroom2020.org, I think.
And it's on our website as well, the link.
Perfect. So you can see it there too.
Yeah, and also I suppose we should say that the exhibition will be taking place, physical exhibition, next year at the same time. So obviously people keep their eyes out for that as well, to actually see some work in the flesh, which will be nice.
Whet your appetite with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so listen, thank you ever so much for joining us, and yeah, stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Bye.
See you soon.
See you soon,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.